Here we go. And we are in. How are you doing today?
Good, thank you.
Thank you so much for coming. It's been, we've had this on the books for a while, and I'm excited that you're here.
Thank you. I am too.
Yeah. So obviously, you've written some fantastic books that deal with what happens after death. And I've got 1,000 questions. I think everyone does, actually. I mean, it's a very important topic because it's something that happens to every single person.
Exactly.
Yeah. But before we talk about death, maybe we can talk about life. And I can, maybe you can help me understand a little bit about how you got into this space and how you kind of made it your life. And we can maybe start with where you're from.
Well, I'm from several different places. I've actually lived the four corners of the United States
Oh, that's amazing.
and Europe,
Mm.
but it began in the South. I was born in Alabama, but I was just a few months old when we moved to Arkansas. That was my parents' home state, and it was still the Great Depression. And so my father was looking for work. And so in Arkansas, Roosevelt had built one of the communities for people to work in order to get them through the Depression. And so my parents were interviewed for that job, and they were accepted. So we moved. I was very young, a few months old, and we moved to that place. And it was a huge lake in the middle, and houses had been built all around it, although you couldn't see any house from one house. It was spacious, very spacious. And it was actually organized on a kind of communistic basis. There was one economy, the cotton. So everybody worked in cotton and picked cotton. Even I did. As a little kid, I had a little 5-pound bag and I would pick cotton. But, and all of the jobs rotated.
That's wild. It almost sounds like they built a commune.
It did. It was like that. But I think that was Roosevelt's only experiment with that kind of thing. But it worked well, as far as I was aware. My parents later, I asked them many questions about it. But I had a brother, 3 years older than I. And we just had a wonderful life. It was country, out in nature, all of the time. And I don't think my mother knew for a lot of times. She says she did. But we just went all over the place. Nothing could harm us unless it was a runaway horse. And my brother would jerk me out of the road many times for that. But it was just an idyllic world, I must say.
There's something to be said for that, right? Like just this whole thing about growing up outside, working the land, like, being outdoors, nature, fresh air.
Exactly. And there was no television then.
That's the best.
Yeah. And there was a radio in our house, but I don't remember it ever being on except on a Sunday afternoon. We listened to Gino Audrey for half an hour. And the rest was play. And, I was thinking of this later. It was so natural to me at the time. But our house was almost 2 miles from the school, one school and one grocery store. And my brother went with me always there and back. But I was 2 years old when I started making that walk to school and back every day.
Wow. Did you? I mean, it's crazy. What was that, like pre-kindergarten or whatever? I mean.
Well, it had to be 2 or 3 years old. Yeah.
That's wild.
I know. I can't. Did I do that? I had my brother with me. He was 3 years older, but still there and back. And in the summer, I went and he didn't, but he had to take me and then come pick me up.
Wow.
And there were about 3 barns of horses. My father had one, so I was around horses to some degree. So anyway, that's where it began.
Wow. I've never been to Alabama or Arkansas, but they're definitely on my map, on the list of places I definitely want to visit. It sounds idyllic.
It was for us, and it was the last time I was there, lots of lakes and rivers and trees, space.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what we knew. And my brother and I would just, since there was no television, we would make up stories and we created whole worlds, and we would decide that the particular tree did this and that, So we made up our own stories and had great fun doing it.
Without distraction, the imagination thrives, doesn't it?
That's so, yeah, to give it a chance.
Something the current generation, that are coming of age who are 12, 15, 18 right now, they will never not be distracted. Yeah, crazy, isn't it?
It is. I mean, I have a phone today, and if something goes wrong, I have Kim help me with it, or the computer, whatever.
Of course.
But I'm not connected to it the way that generation is.
Well, I got into doing these adventure travel shows with BBC and stuff like that, and I would go and climb these mountains, and of course I'd be offline for like 2 weeks, and it was absolutely beautiful not to be checking your phone every morning and getting anxiety about people messaging you or being angry or blah blah blah. Like it's just, you just park it, take a few pictures, but you just leave it off because you got no signal, and you sleep so much better. It's just it's a different life.
And something happens. Something happens to your mind in nature that can't happen with the distractions.
No, I think when you're out in nature, it's a real healing process. And I think the cities and the society that we've built for ourselves are slowly tearing us apart. And nature is that, like, the one place we can go to get our healing on.
Yes, and I have met a woman who's helped me in healing things, and she even to cooking bread and having it rise, she says it draws from the environment you're in to heal the whole digestive system. So it gave me such an incredible feeling of thinking, yes, our body is that body, and we work together for our healing. I like that very much.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are coming back to this idea. I mean, this is a nice little tangent, and I'm definitely going to come back to Arkansas. But I think that people are now finally, I think, starting to think of things of being holistic. Like they're thinking of things from a 360-degree point of view. Like if I cook this like this and I don't use this and this, like I'm not going to get the benefits, or everything's connected, I feel.
It is.
Yeah.
And that's certainly in the visionary state, which is another part of our mind, a natural state to be in, but we've just cut it off in the past, is that, that it's all so connected, that we're really all one. I'd heard that before, but when I experienced it, it's like, oh, this is incredible. It just has such an ecstatic feeling about it, knowing we're all together and working together in so many different ways and bodies.
And knowing that it's crazy that we all can't get along. Okay, but hold on. So you're 3 years old, your brother's 6, and you guys are doing school runs in Arkansas as a child. So what were your interests growing up in Arkansas when you kind of got older?
Well, first of all, I should say that some of that was brought to an end one Sunday, very fateful Sunday, December 7th, 1941. We were listening to Gene Autry, and the program was interrupted by a voice that said that the Japanese had bombed Pearl Harbor.
That was a big one.
And our parents were pretty serious, and they just thought we should go out to play, which was okay with us. But I didn't know what had happened, and because they were so serious, I wanted to know, what does bombed mean? I had no images in my head of destruction. We'd never even seen a film until later, and I think it was King Kong in a silent movie. But so I just pestered my mother to death after that. Well, what is war? What is it? And she tried to explain, and I realized something that changed my life, and that is that it was the adults who were fighting. I mean, if my brother and I got into an argument, she would try to get us to calm down, discuss it, and work it out. I mean, we never thought of fighting. And when I found out that the world of adults were at war, it was a deep, dark strain in me. Of course, since I wasn't in a war area, I could let it go and have fun, but it was always there. And when we moved to Michigan, my father worked then in the weapons industry. They turned the car industry into weapons industry, and he got a job there. And I think the community was dissolved at that point. So both parents were working, and they would usually work on Saturdays. So we had all of our chores on Saturday morning we had to do, but then we could go to the movies. And that's what kids in the 40s did. On Saturdays, they went to the movies. And there I saw war in the newsreel. The movies were good for kids, but they played the news. And that brought up that thing, something's not right with the world. They're fighting, and it's adults and not in control. And I think that was decisive for why, one of the reasons that I spent my life trying to figure out what's wrong.
I think that's interesting. Like we live in such a visual world. Like if you say Fiji, a picture will come to your mind. Yeah. But here you are as a child in Arkansas, and Pearl Harbor happens, and you've never seen a picture of a plane, a bomb, a naval ship, a harbor and destruction, but that's something we all see every day 1,000 times now. Yeah. What a great way to grow up. Just cut off from all the bullshit.
And we didn't even know it, but we were happy. We were just at a wonderful time. But I later thought how incredible that was, that we could live without all of those images of this. But it made a profound difference when I heard about it. And then when I saw it, it just created such an emptiness in me that I just didn't know what to do with it. And even in grade school, that would come sometimes, and I think, I'm thirsty, I need something to drink. Well, it wasn't that. It was that hunger to know what's going on and can it be fixed?
Can it be fixed? Yeah. I'm asking the same question today. Yeah.
I think with when we really do allow ourselves to use not just the left brain, which has become what we are in Western culture because of all of this censorship, and we can get into that later if you want to and how that happened, but when we really do use the right brain connected to the fifth brain component, the heart, and we're in that place, there is that sense that it can be fixed, but we have to go through some things.
I'm glad you're so hopeful. I hope you have enough hope for both of us.
Well, there were so many times I didn't.
Yeah.
I went down to the pits, and I think we have to do that to be able to see the darkness that does in fact exist today. We have to see it and know what it is. Otherwise, we can't fix it.
It's true. And I think too many people ignore the past and ignore our histories, right? And we're not learning from them. I mean, clearly we're not learning from them, because look at what's going on in Ukraine and Russia. Like, it's almost a complete exact replica of World War II and fought with almost the same means.
It is. And my husband was from Hungary and fought in 1959 in the Hungarian Revolution. And I met him when I went to Europe to work. And I went back there. Once amnesty was granted, we waited a while. We didn't really trust it because Russia was still in control. But then we went back and we stayed there probably for over a year. Well, I was teaching at the international school in Vienna, so we go back and forth to Budapest and then the villages. But all of that was such a part of his life and my life, that to be occupied and to know it. I mean, there's all types of controls going on.
Which most people don't know. Yeah.
And I thought that was interesting, when they turned on the news, it was a joke. They wouldn't even watch it, because they knew it was propaganda. And we haven't figured that out with news.
Till this day. Yeah. Okay. So I guess you're right. World War II, Pearl Harbor attack. I guess the economy kicks up, right? And then your father was able to get a job in Michigan because they turned all the car companies into defense companies and to prepare vehicles and weapons for the war. And I mean, what was it like going to the movies to see a comedy or to see like a children's movie, and then to get that 3 or 5 minute newsreel at the beginning showing all the war and chaos? Like, how did that affect you?
Terribly.
Yeah.
Of course, no one knew it. I wonder if I knew it, because then we'd leave and my brother and I would laugh and talk and play and go home. We'd meet our mother and go home. But that I can still see some of the images and the emptiness, the horror as a child to realize the world doesn't know what it's doing. Something seriously wrong here.
It's that's tough. I mean, what did you kind of do after the war kind of was over? I mean, did your family stay in Michigan?
Yes, they stayed, but always wanting to go back. That was their home territory. And then we did, just for middle school. I stayed that long. But that was a wonderful time for me because it was country again. And a lot of different people, doing different things in the country, and older women. I had a lot of relationships with older women with big gardens, they were just kind of children. And so it was a wonderful time for me to be in the country again. And my father ran a grocery store, so we had everybody coming and going. But it was a whole different way of life. But then for high school, my dad, it didn't work. Economically, he couldn't make it in Arkansas. So they went back to Michigan, to a different city. And that was wonderful through my high school years. The people I met were wonderful. It was a great experience. I loved it. But I went to the South for college.
Okay.
And then after that, I went to Europe to study. So,
And what did you study in college? I mean, did you have this interest in death and the mind and our spirit and all this kind of stuff? Like, did you have that interest in university? Did something spark it other than the memories of war when you were a child?
well, it was a Christian college, although Christians weren't quite like they are today. But my parents were not religious at all. But my brother and I always would choose a church when we moved, where there were lots of kids and programs. And I was very taken with the message and very much influenced by this man who was compassionate, loving, ethical.
Clearly a fiction of everyone's imagination. That doesn't exist.
Friend model. But I went there, but I realized when I was there, after the first year, I never went to church again. But it was in this beautiful country. And I did a lot of thinking about it, and I just came to terms with the fact, no, I cannot believe. And I wanted to know through some kind of experience. So, of course, the university taught scientific worldview, which was dreadful, that there's nothing but matter. There's no other dimensions of reality. This is it. And you can't change it. You have no effect on matter. And of course, we know that's kind of funny now. We look at it and change it. But also that there's no meaning or purpose. We're a fluke of nature, and when you're dead, you're dead. That was pretty bad. That doesn't help.
No, it doesn't seem right, does it?
No.
Yeah.
And so there it was. I couldn't believe the Christian story, which was beautiful enough, although heaven seemed pretty dull from their descriptions of it. But I hoped that the scientific story wasn't real. So that set me on a quest to try to find out, do we know? Can we know anything for sure?
It's really true, isn't it? I remember, it's funny that you went through that kind of awakening in university, where it's like you were introduced to the Christian world and rejected it, and then you were introduced to the scientific world, and you're like, well, that can't be it either. So like, where's the third door?
Exactly. Where is it? And I had to spend my life looking for it.
Well, what a great pursuit, though.
I wouldn't have had any other. I'm so grateful. But I have to say that, I studied everything I could, studied world religions and mythology, taught mythology and fairy tale, very symbolic, which help us to understand ourselves, and went to South America twice with shamans. But it really was, and I was pretty sure of things, but I hadn't really experienced higher states of consciousness until our son died. And then we did, and my husband too, and he didn't have any interest in that kind of thing. He was a businessman, but he was kind to me and tried to act like he was listening when I told him about it. But everything changed when our son died, and we experienced his consciousness. And in the Western world, that sounds, although it's sounding less and less crazy, but we definitely did experience him with tremendous amounts of information. And my first book, Miracle of Death, there's nothing but life, based on the experiences that we had. We recorded them afterwards to be sure that we'd get it right.
Okay, we'll come back to that terrible tragedy of losing your son. I'm sorry about that, but we'll come back to that. But where I'm curious, when you left university looking for something, where did you go first?
That's a good question. I wanted to go to different places. Maybe they had different understanding, and I was attracted to Europe. And so after finishing my master's at that Southern University, and I had gone with that university to Vienna to study for the summer, and we traveled throughout Europe. And here was a whole world it was very different in the 50s when I went.
Right, it would all be rebuilding after World War II, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And they still had so many of the old ways, And so then when I came back, I wanted to go back to Europe to live, to work or whatever. But I did that just before the master's. Then I got my master's in American Studies. And I then got a job in Europe working with the armed forces, organizing entertainment for military. And of course, my mother was not happy about this. She says, "You don't know anything about men." And I said, "Well, I guess I'll learn." Anyway, but it turned out to be a good experience because I was in Europe and could travel and went back to Vienna, where I had gone to school. And mainly there were Hungarian refugees there whom I met and saw again. And you know, an interesting thing, when I was in Vienna, that was in 1959, of course, Hungary was closed. No one could go in. It was totally occupied by the Russians. But they had a World Youth Convention, I guess you would call it, in Vienna. The communists came from the Eastern European bloc, and we all met together. And that was just incredible. Here there were refugees who were students. We were there from America. We were students. And we were much more naive than the refugees were. But and I was studying Thomas Mann and other writers at the time. But we spent so much time at this conference. We were talking about everything, discussing and reading, and it was just very alive. So when I came home, that's when I went again to the South for my master's. I was just trying to figure all of that out. What is the split in the human mind that's so like the split in Europe? The communists never did have that conference again on the West Side.
Too many free ideas floating around. That's an interesting way to describe our brain. Like you just kind of referenced the Iron Curtain, which divided Europe as being something similar to what's in our brain, dividing our brain and not allowing us to use the full. Yeah.
And when I was working on my master's and filled with all of that, actually wrote a paper of that. I don't remember what the title was now, but it was the division in the mind as the division we had in Eastern Europe. So yeah, and then I really understood that so much better as the years passed, how much the censorship and the structure of our culture had actually built an iron wall between the left and right brain and heart consciousness. We forgot that the heart is a brain component until the 20th century.
Yeah, I didn't even know that until today.
Yeah. Well, Heart Math is an organization you would love probably to look into because they've done a lot of scientific studies, and it's incredible work and our ancestors knew that. Mm-hmm. They knew, if you see pictures of Jesus with this bright light at the heart, of course, he was obviously censored too and made into something that he wasn't. But certainly our ancestors knew that the heart has its own consciousness. And if we are not in touch with that and the right brain, then we are violent. And we now know that if we're just severed from the right brain and the heart and we're just living in the left brain, that we have the same characteristics as a schizophrenic. We cannot see context, we can't see meaning or purpose, and we tend to have the fiction of our own superiority, the left brain, and we want to control. So it's a good way of understanding what's happening in the world today. The real need to control and be violent and arrogant, because it's the fiction that the left brain is superior.
You just completely described every politician.
I know. It is true.
Yeah.
It is true. And if I could just say very quickly, one group of people who knew of our ancestors, the pre-Socratic philosophers, which we wouldn't even know about if it weren't for the scholar Peter Kingsley, discovered, because they had been blocked off by an Iron Curtain too, beginning with Plato, that here were people who knew how to go into altered states of consciousness for hours. They knew how to trigger it in others. And the people, they were poets, ambassadors, scientists, visionaries, mystics, and they actually, the people who had these profound experiences even got the laws from the other dimension of reality. In other words, if a city was in trouble, they would call on the pre-Socratics. Pre-Socratics would go into a deep state, and they would find the laws that town needed to heal. So the wonderful thing that I want to get at is that the president, you might say, in each of these towns, or the prime minister, was a philosopher who had a mystic. He was a mystic. I mean, can you imagine our presidents having to go through these initiations and of long hours of being taught by the other side? In fact, all of our disciplines came from them, and they got it in an altered state of consciousness that is so blocked off in our culture.
Yeah, I mean, it almost seems like everyone in power is just spewing out authoritative messaging. It doesn't matter right, left, center. It doesn't matter what's going on.
They don't know what's going on.
No, that's a fact. Yeah.
And I couldn't even imagine a world in which no one could even think about being president without having been initiated for years into this higher state of consciousness. And we can do that. That can be. It existed.
Instead of a higher state of consciousness, everyone's just trying to raise money.
Higher levels of money.
Higher levels of spending, ad spending. So you go to Hungary, you meet your future husband, and then what? Do you go back to the U.S. with him?
Well, actually, I met him in Europe because no one could go to Hungary at that point.
Right. Yeah.
And so he had come as a refugee to the States, and after having been in the old Yugoslavia for almost a year, because he escaped from Hungary, crawled out actually, but he was going to be drafted into the American Army, and so he signed up so he could go to Europe, hoping he might get one of his parents out just for a while to see them, but he couldn't. So anyway, then I got a job in Germany, and he was actually playing international soccer because he played soccer, so he's on the soccer team for the Army, and then they saw him and they wanted it on the All Forces team. So the All Forces, called CISM, they played the international teams in Europe.
Oh wow, I never knew that.
Yeah, I didn't know that either. So it's the Council International de Sport Militaire or something like that. So he had a wonderful life, and I happened to meet him when he came into where I was working, and so anyway, I met him then, and then we married, came back to New York, and then he said, "There's only one place we can live in this country, and that's California."
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, because he had come here as a refugee. So then life began, very different kind of life. And I didn't know what to think. I still was in that deep state of, everybody thought I was funny. But, I had that horrible streak in me that was forcing me to learn everything I could and try to figure it out. But I couldn't talk to anyone much about it, except Istvan, my husband. But he was so optimistic and supportive of whatever. But it was good to be married to someone who was stable and optimistic.
Yeah, that would be helpful. That would be helpful. Stability.
Throw the damn books in the corner. Let's go see 007 or some crazy thing,
Mm-hmm.
But it was very healthy in that sense. So I started teaching then college at that time.
It's very hard, I think, asking tough questions, because I feel like it really can isolate you. And unless you're strong enough to push through and really represent your own ideas and not be afraid of your own ideas and not care what other people think, I think it can be super isolating, especially when you're challenging things like religion and death and life.
That's true. Or even asking the question, well, what about it? Do we live on or what? What's going on? I couldn't talk to my colleagues in a college about that, or really much of anybody. So the people who were close to me, actually, just Istvan really was the one I could talk with about it. And he didn't have much to say about it, but he allowed the conversation, allowed me to talk and try to figure it out. And so I had, I went to college, I got my doctorate, and then I thought, wait a minute, I've given the left brain its due. So I went to South America twice, and I had some experiences with sacred medicine and shamanic drumming and things like that, but I still didn't have answers that I needed.
Mm-hmm. And did you do a full ayahuasca ceremony?
I did not do ayahuasca, but I did with San Pedro. Was one of the in South America. That was one of the major sacred medicines that they use.
Mm-hmm.
And later, I actually worked with LSD twice, but nothing happened.
Oh,
it was a very powerful LSD for others. I think it just wasn't the time for me, And then I went to South America and worked with San Pedro. And then when I came back, I worked with other medicines. But I never did do ayahuasca. And after our son died, he alerted my husband that I should not use that particular one for some reason. And I thought, okay, I'll go along with that because there's so many other things they've said that have come true, so I won't challenge it. But there are other sacred medicines, which is, Terence McKenna was an ethnobotanist. And when I heard the things he was talking about, I thought, I need to know that. Plus, in teaching mythology, at Eleusis, sacred plant was used. And I thought, I can't teach something I've not experienced. And so then I worked with different kinds of sacred medicine, which changed my life for sure. But I think it was Terence and others have said, when you make the relationship with nature in the form of the sacred plant and what it is and what your brain is, when they meet, the cosmos opens up. And I found that was true. I like thinking of it as having a relationship with Pachamama, with nature, that you're talking with her and you hear things you'd never come up with.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting, Pachamama. Yeah, I remember I filmed in Peru many years ago. One of the interesting things about filming all around the world is you get introduced to all the organized religions, right? So I mean, just filming in India alone, actually, I mean, I was in Bodh Gaya one day, which was where Prince Siddhartha was enlightened and created Buddhism. The next day you're in Varanasi, where the Hindus are burning the dead and putting them in the Ganges. Then, a couple of weeks later, you're up in the north and along the border of Pakistan, and you're in a Muslim area, and people practicing Islam. And then you come back to the United States and you get indoctrinated into various forms of Christianity. And you just sit here and you be like, well, okay, like we can respect all of that, but there's got to be something else here going on, right?
With me all my life, there's got to be something else. Yeah. And I knew I wanted to experience it. Mm. And of course, in the West, as I came to realize, the West got rid of all of the techniques to experience. There are even stories that Jesus taught techniques of achieving higher consciousness. And the Nag Hammadi text, which the church would never allow in its canon, tells us about a Jesus that says very clearly, I didn't come to save you. I came to remind you of who you are. You and I are one. When you drink from my lips, I am not your master. We are one.
It's nice that you went to South America and started seeking out this kind of enlightenment, because I think in South America, Pachamama, the nature, the female entity of nature, and that's what people talk about there. It's nice because you can have your own relationship with her, and you're supposed to connect individually with nature and with that entity, right? Whereas in the Western world, everyone just wants to put something in between you and all these entities or all these feelings or all these teachings, right? So that they can control us. Like organized religion is just a form of political control in a lot of ways. So it's nice, that some of the teachings in South America and they go back thousands of years beyond organized religion have this direct connection, which I think is hugely important.
Oh, it is. And that's why I became so interested in that type of experiencing, the shamanic mystical, that was actually experiencing those realities, not going through the left brain, mm-hmm. because Western religions are left brain pretty much. I mean, people do feel things and they pray and they are changed by the belief system, but there's something far more powerful than that, and that is actually finding that consciousness within ourselves. In fact, in the Nag Hammadi text, it is said that it is not enough to follow the Christ. You must become the Christ.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
You must become it. And if you will bring forth what is within you, you will be saved. That's what saves you. But if you cannot bring it forth, it will destroy you. Pretty good text.
Not bad, not bad.
No wonder the church tried to burn them and destroy them, and the monks buried them, and we found them after World War II. So I know why they wanted them gone.
So you're doing all these teachings. You're also experimenting with your own consciousness at the same time. Is this when you had your son in California, when you had relocated here and were teaching here, and this is where it all happened?
Well, I was teaching during the 60s and 70s, and my students, and of course I'd read Ellen Watts, Aldous Huxley, and people who were experimenting with LSD or a mushroom. They were just finding out all those things. And I could see that for my students, it could be both dangerous and incredibly enlightening. But my husband and I decided, there were all kinds of stories about, these sacred plants destroy the chromosomes, this and that. Well, we hadn't had a child and we didn't know for sure. So we were just cautious, and I didn't use anything. But I certainly heard plenty of stories and I read about it. But it wasn't until our son was, well, he was probably 18 when I went to Peru. Uh, and we talked about sacred medicine, and we talked also about, as Terence McKenna says, the drugs that will make a cockroach out of you, But I was pretty private about what I was doing. But it was really after he died. He was killed in a car accident at 20.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had been to Peru once at that point. And so then my husband and I both used sacred medicine.
And as a way of dealing with the grief and the trauma, or again, trying to find some other kind of enlightenment?
Well, to open us up to what had happened. I mean, it was, of course, so devastating. But there were things that were happening too. I'd had visions before, and I really felt that we needed to know what was going on also with his death. And we were with him. I mean, it was an incredible experience that he explained why he had to die, how it was choice, not accidentally, and why we were born. He wouldn't be like telling us something. He'd say, remember, Mom, remember, Dad, this is what we decided. But he wanted us to know he's perfectly fine. But he also wanted us to know that the earth is going through a huge transformation, and wanted us to know something about that.
And when your son had passed on and you went to Peru, when did you start having communications with your deceased son while you were in Peru, or even
before?
Started before.
Yeah. He was dead before I took the second trip.
Mm-hmm.
And he had said to his friends were always trying to figure everything out too. And he had said to them, the really neat thing would be, if one of us were to die, is to have our ashes taken to sacred spots on the planet. And so when Jenny, his girlfriend, told me that, I said, then that's what we'll do. And so the second time I went back, I took some of his ashes, and I told one of the shamans that I wanted to be alone. I wanted to go to Machu Picchu, but Huayna Picchu is the big mountain. And we went down to the very bottom of that in the cave at the base of Huayna Picchu, and they call it the womb of the Great Mother. And so I said, I want to do San Pedro in the cave at night alone while I leave his ashes there. Okay, they agreed to that. And then one of the shamans got a little nervous about me being there alone, so he left another shaman with me outside the cave. And it's interesting because I found out later, he said, it wasn't a fluke, it was a divine happening. He said, because I lost my son, I think it was maybe 2 years before. And while he was outside the cave and I was doing the medicine work inside, he also experienced his son for the first time.
Oh, wow.
It was huge. I mean, it's sort of like we loved each other because we had such a bond, with that. But it seemed that there was another mission there. It was, Pachamama was pretty much in control of that world. And it was about all children and what we'd done to them by giving them, bequeathing them a story that is so destructive that there's nothing. Mm-hmm. You're nothing. You're just a fluke of nature. It was that sorrow from her that I experienced deeply.
And that's of the belief of the modern sciences that we exist with now, that we're all just particles floating in the earth, and there's nothing beyond us or behind us or in front of us. We're all just kind of matter, and eventually we'll return to dust, and that's it.
That's it. And that's the materialistic myth, mm-hmm. which quantum physics has blown up, because they know there are other dimensions of reality. They know the quantum field is explained by scientists in a similar way that the mystics explain the spirit state, So, but quantum physics now is a science that's beginning to be worthy of itself and of nature. But so much harm has been done. I mean, terrible harm to our children.
It's funny that like centuries ago, these quote unquote uncivilized societies that lived in the jungle and built the pyramids and all these kinds of things, that we can even call them uncivilized when they were so connected to the earth, so connected to nature, so connected with each other, and even figured out astronomy, long before religion tried to destroy it by saying that all the planets revolve around Earth and all this bullshit. Like, it's amazing that, 1,000 years ago, people had it more figured out than we do today.
And another one of those types of iron curtains that's been built is that not only that, but there's very good evidence that exists now that there was a worldwide seafaring civilization before any that we know of. And interestingly, in Egypt, many of the scholars who work there, or maybe I shouldn't say many, some, especially Schwaller de Lubitz, who studied every aspect, but at the Temple of Edfu in Egypt, there are texts and etchings of figures, but the texts say quite clearly that they came from an island that was destroyed, and they brought that civilization with them, because many of the people who studied think it was best in the beginning. I mean, tremendous knowledge. We couldn't build a pyramid today, but also
on time or on budget. Sorry, just a joke, but yes, that's.
The Egyptologists couldn't see anything because they were believers in a strange understanding of evolution, that everything that comes later is better, and that they just could not see what had been done, what had been created in Egypt. And now we know that they probably had a sacred science which was actually built into everything, all of their structures, their rituals. For instance, each temple would be like an alembic. You walk into it, and you, as an aggregate of the biofield, would activate, and all of the structure in that temple would activate an illumination of that aspect of science. I mean, you didn't know it through the left brain, but through illumination. And each temple then had something different. If one was initiated at each temple, you would have experienced the sacred science. I mean, we couldn't even imagine that today.
No.
So we're opening up to exactly how brilliant these people were.
Mm-hmm. And so your son passes on in a car accident, and it seems like he was reaching out to you, and you recognized that, and then you did the trip to Peru to take his ashes to the womb of the mountain, or the Pachamama, the nature, and then you had that profound experience that you also shared with a local shaman. What was it like then coming back to California with these experiences and ideas? I mean, could you even talk to anyone? I can't imagine how rigid the thinking was, decades ago.
It was in the 91 he was killed.
Mm.
And no, I mean, even people at the college, I mean, they knew that I did have experiences. No one would dare ask me about it. And one person that I thought I could talk with, a man I had known for so long, we taught together, when I was trying to tell him something, he actually started walking back.
I was just like, I'm getting out of here.
And so, well, that's not possible. No, I couldn't. And then when I wrote the book, I was cautious about, I mean, people got it. I don't know whether they read it or not. No one talked to me. I didn't talk to them. And yet they all would say, there's something going on with you, but they didn't know how to ask about it or talk about it. But when I came back from Peru, the second time, my husband was still alive. He was killed in another car accident in Hungary 2 years after our son.
Oh my God, I'm so
And my mother was killed in a car accident 1 year before our son.
My God.
And, our son was on life support for about 13 days. And the day that doctor came to us and said he's not going to make it, and I said, we'll begin the death process then of taking him off the machines. It was exactly the day and the hour that my mother had been killed 1 year before. And so it just, those things, these synchronicities at certain times in our lives seem to stack up. We have a lot of them.
And how do you make sense of that?
Well, I knew, as Carl Jung, the psychiatrist Carl Jung said, it was we could call it a coincidence, but it was a meaningful one. And I've certainly come to honor those meaningful coincidences, that they do open us to a deeper meaning, and we might not find it for a while, or we might, even in dreams that I had early on. Sometimes I didn't understand them, or a vision. And then the pieces, I'd gather more pieces and I could put the puzzle together later.
So it sounds to me, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that you started having these questions about faith, the afterlife, the way our society is, our energy, our the way shamans teach it, everything. You were having a lot of questions, and then your son died, and it almost seems like that set you on a totally more aggressive trajectory to find out answers. Is that right?
Well, I think I was on that all along.
Okay.
But I think what his death did in the opening up of that higher consciousness, that we were with him, and we used different methods. I had some just spontaneous, and my husband did too. I mean, many spontaneous experiences of his presence. And, but in fact, my husband said, going to work, it was like a tape recorder, reminding him of everything. And certainly he'd put it on ice, for sure. But our son also said, Dad, you had to do that until I left, so that it would be okay for you to do that. And this is an interesting thing I'll just throw in, is you learn a lot of interesting things when that consciousness comes, is that the two of them were of the same soul. Sometimes they were born as one and sometimes as two. And so I had that experience in a vision long before. Then when our son died, my husband had it. He was just blown away with everything that he experienced. But that's when Ph.D., our son, said, sometimes you go first, sometimes I, whichever works better, because he said we're all co-creating and creating in simultaneous, what is the word I'm looking for, parallel worlds. And that we're not just in this parallel time, but we're in another one. But at any rate, my husband was, the experience of that level of consciousness, when he set up, he just said, I had no idea what you were talking about. Because he said, I've never had it. I can't understand. Well, he had it. And he said, I will never look at the world in the same way again.
So you were going through all these teachings on your own and telling him about it, and he would listen, and he would let you do your thing, but he didn't really catch it until your son passed.
No, and I think that that's the thing of the visionary state. The left brain wants a certain kind of evidence, and we know what that is. But it cannot demand the same kind of evidence for the right brain, for the visionary, because for the visionary, the Gnostic, it is the experience that's the evidence. You don't have to prove it in any other way. My husband went through that too, of, how funny it was. The experience is the thing. And to even ask for proof is like hysterical. But when he had the experience, and then it just never again did he have the same attitude. He just said, he's totally changed. And he became my anchor, actually, because I would still have with the university thing sometimes thinking, when I'm in the vision, I know. And then when it's over, it's like the left brain would pounce on it, like more evidence and but it took a while to calm that left brain down and balance it with what was actually happening.
So you said that you had experiences of having your son who had passed in your presence after he had left this world.
Yes.
Physically. What can you explain? Can you walk me through one of those experiences? How did he present himself?
It's just like he was. Now, my husband and also his girlfriend Jenny actually saw his image. I did not, and it was explained to my husband later is that as a mother, it's the material body, the person. You're with the child, with the person you always, and that it was important for me to sever myself from the image. So he would appear to them, and they could see an image, but it was always conversation with them. And so one experience and this was not with sacred medicine, this was a spontaneous experience. I had gone to a bookstore and I was looking books, and I heard music, and the music was just it just was so powerful. I had to sit down. And so as soon as the music was over, I went to the person and asked what was the music, and I'll buy it. And it was Miracles. It was the name of the music room. So I took it home. That my husband was traveling. He traveled a lot. And so I took it home, and I was in the bedroom getting into some sweats, but I put it on. His room became kind of like a meditation room, actually. And I put it on in that room, and I heard it, and it just pulled me into the room. And as soon as I lay down on the bed, my son was present. And I couldn't see him, but I knew where he was. It was as though his presence was in the upper right-hand corner of where I was. I knew he was there. And he said, and it wasn't long at all after he had died, and he said, Mom, let's go through all of the stages of my life. Let's live through those. Because he knew I was obviously in pain. And so we would go through it, and he would say, and it was like we were surfing on the ocean of life. And he said, live each moment fully, then let it go. Live each moment fully, then let it go. Well, I tried to do that. We went through childhood things. We went this, and there were times when I thought, I can't let it go. And I would start going into the ocean, going down, and he would say, let it go, let it go. And then I would rise on the surface again. And so this was just incredible. We went through all sorts of stages. When he got in high school, I said, I think I can let this go. And some of these things.
It's almost like he was like guiding you through the process of grief. Yeah.
Fully. And also in life, live it fully. Everything is for a moment. And just to live it fully and then release it. And so then we got to the hospital when we took him off the machines, and we watched him go into a flatliner. And it was beautiful. He wasn't harmed in appearance by the accident. And I looked at him and I said, I can't do this. I can't let it go. And I was such a deep grief. And then I thought, wait a minute. Here he's dead, and I'm with him. I am with him, his consciousness. And then it was like a celebration. And in that moment, the music stopped. It was like once I achieved that celebration, it stopped. But my son also said something before I reached that point. He said, because I taught Goethe's Faust 1 and 2, my son had not read either one of them, but he knew Faust 2 on the other side. And he said, Mom, remember Faust, when the devil owns him, he is saying, linger, linger this moment. Thou art so beautiful that he couldn't let it go. And that's the moment Mephistopheles grasps him. It's when we cannot let it go. That we live life in a balanced way when we can live it fully and let it go. So that was one of the experiences. And I sat up, and it's like, I looked up at the sky that night, and I thought, the life is miraculous. It helped me to know how to deal with grief. And I learned that grief is very creative. That if we allow ourselves to feel it fully, then it takes us to another place.
A better place.
Hmm?
Maybe a better place?
Well, I think I was stronger and more mature, more balanced once I had experienced death again and again and again. But it was all of the deaths and the grief were gifts.
You've referenced something a few times that I just wanted to have some answers around. So you said you referenced a few times left brain, right brain, and the heart. And I was just wondering if you could walk me through some of the differences between left brain behavior, right brain behavior, and how that heart is connected to it all.
Yes. Well, the left brain develops later than the right brain, and it receives its information from the right brain. But the left brain is what we see all around us today. It's a beautiful aspect of the brain if it's connected to the right brain and the heart. But the left brain has the ability to take something and sever it from the context and look at its various parts, analyze it, put it together, and come up with ideas that we might not come up with. otherwise. But it's very good analytical aspect of the mind. But the right brain, as I said, is older, and it has its own language. It's actually our native language, symbolic language. And if we learn how to understand the symbols, we will have openings to higher consciousness for sure. But the right brain feels and experiences. It sees context and meaning and purpose. And it is connected to higher centers in the brain, the heart. And if that flows through the heart then connects us to the cosmos, to this cosmic consciousness. And, there was a theorist, Jean-Baptiste Vico, in the 1700s, one of the first I know who understood this. He didn't mention the heart. I think we forgot that for a while until the 20th century. But he knew that these great dimensions, these two great dimensions of the brain, have evolved to work together. And he said that the left and right hemispheres must create a relationship and that they must constantly be in movement and relationship with each other. And he put it in this way that there must be an integral and dynamic continuum of movement between these two great hemispheres. Always, all of the information we give, the right brain gives to the left and the left brain takes it apart and but it goes back to the right brain. And for its purpose, its context, its meaning. Vico didn't mention the heart, but our ancestors did, and now with heart math, the scientific studies, we know the heart gives more to the brain than the brain gives to the heart of information. That, as the Sufis say, this is the organ of soul because it connects to the energy field. And if you let it flow through that, then you're open to receive who we are. We're all born out of cosmic consciousness. As Bergson said, Omne Bergson, that we're all universal consciousness. We're born out of that. That's what gives us birth. But we have a limiting valve so that we can do little detail things like what we're doing right now. But every civilization needs to know how to release that valve so we can experience who we really are.
And that's the thing that organized religion has cut off.
Cut off. They have no techniques for that.
Yeah.
And Jesus is said that he did, but Jesus taught a hidden message, a hidden discipline. And that's what's also, talk about Iron Curtain, but his hidden tradition was all about this, is precisely what I mentioned. He knew the heart was...
And it seems like the right brain is the key to that higher consciousness, or that ability to see or understand or feel the multiple dimensions that we exist in.
Absolutely. And its connection to the heart. It's connected to the heart whether we know it or not. But yes, and it has a language. It's a symbolic language. My doctorate was in symbolic mythic language and comparative literature, but that because... and I had a dream one time that I went to a foreign country and I didn't know their language, but I went to teach their native language. Well, that's what I spent my life teaching, was our native language as a language of the heart. And it, as Vico says, today we say, oh, that's just nonsense, no logic there. Vico said, oh, it has logic. It's a poetic logic, a feeling logic. So we really have to be in tune with that, and that will allow us to open up to the heart consciousness.
When do you think, like what era or what level or when in our history was that iron curtain put up between our left and right brain? Like when did that really stop working?
Yeah, well, and that's part of what Merchants of Light is about, is that there's an Old Testament scholar, Margaret Barker, who once all of these texts were available and we're not looking just at a canon that the church has agreed to or that the Torah has agreed to, is that we can see so much more about what was going on. And she shows how that first temple in Judaism was a shaman mystic tradition. And of course it had the feminine. I mean, she was, in fact, Yahweh was married to wisdom, which was the feminine dimension of the divine. And there were images of her everywhere. Well, the Deuteronomists came in 621 BCE. No one knows really quite who they were, priests of some sort, but they destroyed all of that. They just cut down the trees, destroyed everything, got rid of her image. Now here was poor old Yahweh all alone. And he has all of the characteristics of the left brain, of the schizophrenic, you might say. He's jealous, he's vengeful, He has favorites. I mean, this is left brain.
Modern day man.
Yes, precisely. Precisely. And Yahweh just reflects what happens to a culture when you take away the feminine is always symbolized right brain, heart consciousness, and the land, nature. Separate the left brain from that, and you get a tyrant like Yahweh and like today. Killing and favorites. I mean, it's just insane. Well, it is a form of insanity.
And I mean, I studied political science in university, and I read a lot of political theory as well, and I understand how people come together and how hierarchies are created and how people use political control to get things done and everything like that. But it just seems like the cutting off of the right brain put everyone on this path to where we are today, which probably isn't ideal, And it's just like, when do we get that back? Like, is it ever coming back? Like, is there any teachings or any way that we can reignite?
Yes, I think so. And that's what my question was. What are we going to do with it? But after the Deuteronomist, when the time when Jesus was born, Margaret Barker, sees that as a renaissance of the First Temple tradition. He was a mystic, shaman mystic, and he tried to teach that hidden tradition. Well, then along comes the Roman Church, and so they make it, they're not going to have that, because mystic was a heretic. So they made Jesus into a god, whom you must, which is outside yourself. It's never going to work. So in the book, what I discovered and wrote about is that here we have the cave cultures, the Egyptian, incredible spiritual culture, shaman mystic culture. And then we now know the Hebrew First Temple was a shaman mystic culture. We now know the pre-Socratics were. But all of this was pushed underground. It's a whole different story when organized Deuteronomist or the Roman Church got into it. And so all of that went underground. But what I discovered is that there were 4 incredible Renaissance periods in Europe. One was in the High Middle Ages. I mean, what do we have? The feminine appears everywhere. And the story of Parsifal and the Grail, it was all about finding the right brain in the heart. I mean, beautiful stories. And of course, when the church saw what was going on and got rid of it, and then the Italian Renaissance, it actually was much more. It involved all aspects of culture, but it began by experience in the Corpus Hermeticum. That's when that came back to Italy from Macedonia, I think it was, and the philosophers saw that, that's what ignited the Renaissance. And then there was another one in 1600, after they'd been all kind of put down in the Italian. Then in the 1600s in old Prague, Bohemia, there were scientists and mystics who came together there. And then there was also in Germany. Germany came later because then there was the formation of new science, the Royal Society for the Advancement of Science. The church said you can't study anything but matter. I mean, they didn't say it. They were that. Everybody knew that, because when they destroyed the scientists and mystics in Prague in 1620, their 30 Years' War, and by the time, everybody's killing everybody, Protestant, Catholics, whatever. So when science did emerge, it was really clear. You can't say anything about a mystic or a shaman or experience. It's out. And then the French philosophers came along, and they said, we don't need any of that stuff. We've reached the apex of rational thinking, and that's all there is. And so here we have all of this Iron Curtain built again and again and again. But today is the 5th Renaissance. It has come back with quantum physics, and so many people are having experiences, and it's amazing what's happening today.
I've had a few people on the podcast actually who talk about this, and it's a incredibly interesting topic. I'm fascinated by everything, and this is amazing. But one thing that keeps coming back is that there are people in our society who are mediums or who are sensitive to the right brain teachings or the right brain understandings or our different dimensions, and those are the people who can feel the energy of people who have passed on or other spirits or who are all around us. And I'm wondering if you see yourself as like a medium who can tap that, or are you coming at it from maybe a different angle?
Yeah, I think, and the good mediums will say, yes, I have this ability, but you have the potential for it too. And the ideal state is for you to develop it in yourself. Uh, so, no, I have no ability as a medium. And of course, I'm sure Bob talked about the good, bad, and indifferent in between me.
He did.
But there are some mediums who, they just, and people were always saying, well, they told me everything that's true, but I want to know, but what did they tell you about the other side, and what's some things you don't know, and some of them do. But I think right now what people want from mediums is just to have information that they are existing, that they're still alive, So no, I'm not that. But I think that, the very death itself kind of rips your heart open and makes certain things possible if you let it. And the sacred medicine and the music, so many things like that. But I think what I experience is what we all can experience. And my husband too, I would never have thought. He just went deep into it. And so many experiences of, it's not anything you prove. You experience it, you know it, And that's what life is about, is balancing who we are and co-creating with the universe. I think we evolved with the abilities to be always in touch with that other world, not to be separated like we have been, but to co-create with it. We have the intellect and the heart to do it. And we've built that curtain so that we can't do it. We're learning how, I think. And people are having these strange experiences and think, oh my God, something really does exist. And so they're pursuing it. And I think it's a time that people are pursuing it all over the world. And in the meantime, if they can't get in touch with someone who's in the other dimension now, is that a good medium is a good thing and it helps them. But the most important thing is we need to know that we can develop that within ourselves. It is our heritage.
Yeah.
Our children's heritage.
I think that's interesting because I think, one could say that because we've been so left brain dominant for so many generations, it's almost this idea that we have access to our right brain or these other dimensions or these other feelings and emotions and things like that is not possible for most of us. We haven't figured out the tools to unlock that. And I think that one of the interesting things is that probably has led to like a huge amount of mental health issues. And I was reading a little while ago about an artist, a performer, and he had suffered from depression for his whole life, and he was on medication his whole life. And then, he did ayahuasca and things like that and started really trying to understand himself more fully and more completely. And through various ceremonies and various medicinal medicines and things like that, he completely kind of cured himself of his depression and is no longer on medication and feels great. And he kind of opened up and said it was basically of him trying to understand his entire consciousness more completely. And I think that when we do block that off and we do put that iron curtain down, it really affects all of us in really negative ways, because I feel like we're all living with this shit.
Yeah, we are. And that's, I think, an example of what has happened to a lot of people. Of course we're going to be depressed. Here we are capable of loving someone so deeply and then gone, and that's it. There's nothing more to be said here, Of course, and if we just look around us, and that was a question as a kid, is this all there is to it? What? And so when we begin to experience that other dimension, we're not going to be depressed. We want to know more and more about it. And I met a person who was doing a podcast. He had been on drugs all of his life, practically. And his mother suffered terribly. She died while he was still in prison because of it. And I don't know, he got out and he did ayahuasca. And he said, I have never wanted to do drugs again. And it's how to heal addiction is so hard. Mm-hmm. But I think addiction is a result of not experiencing the highs that we experience, the ecstasy that we experience when we are open to spirit or to the quantum field or soul, whatever. That is ecstasy.
Yeah, I think you could say maybe that drugs and alcohol are something we're using because we can't seem to find the tools to find our right brain. Yeah. It's like a masking tool.
Yes, it is, exactly. And so many of our children are, and people, not just children, adults, but I mean, is this the best we can give our children?
Pretty pathetic, isn't it?
It's pathetic. Just like a few things we've seen lately are pathetic representing us,
Yeah.
But no, I think that, and I do think that we now know these things again, and we are looking for techniques. And sometimes people just hit on them accidentally. Was it Botkin? In Texas, he was working in a veterans hospital. Someone had developed a method of just helping them to get in touch with themselves. It was an eye movement. He developed it in a little bit different way. And there was a man who was a veteran. He had been in Vietnam. And he had met a girl there, a little girl, a child, and he was adopting her. And he was going to bring her back to the States. Not long before he was to come back, the orphanage where she was staying was bombed and she was killed. That's it. It couldn't get over it. I mean, who cares anymore, And he was in the hospital for a few years, I think. And so Bodkin worked with him with this eye movement, adding his little bit of a change to it. And he was with her on the other side. And it was just beautiful. And she wanted him to know, I'm fine. And your love made all the difference to me. Boy, he knew that. He had that contact with her. Well, he left the hospital.
Yeah.
It was just fine. No more depression for him, thank you. I mean, I think we are going to discover many more techniques. We're not going to live this way.
Who wins when we suffer grief? Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's...
Kind of grief you can't deal with.
Right. Like, I just feel like if we all knew that the people who passed on were still around and okay, no one would be sad.
No.
Wow.
And then we'd begin to see, meaning, purpose, and what's this all about?
We'd start asking more questions.
That's right. And finding answers. It makes it. And I think that's the most important thing that we need to know right now for this fifth Renaissance is that we're eternal. We might as well get good at it. Well,
This is interesting because I studied political science and political theory and stuff like that. So I'm always thinking about when did people or those in charge, probably the Roman Catholic Church has played a huge role in this, suppressing a lot. But like when did the church and the politicians of the day, hundreds of years ago, decide that we were all just going to be units of economic consumption? And then every single thing that has happened since that day, whatever that D-Day was, 1630, 1620, whatever it was, when someone decided we're all just going to be units of economic consumption, and then no higher learning, no right brain understanding, no studying of shamanistic teachings. You know what I mean? It was just going to be
what's nonsense. Yeah, the shamanistic was nonsense. Well, certainly we know in Western culture that 621 was a real beginner. There was left brain and a male only, no feminine aspect at all, no right brain or heart. And then when the church came along, and church for hundreds of years, I mean, they killed people coming and going who even had a book that might or said anything. I mean, they really clamped down. Now, I'm wondering, were the Deuteronomists people who just wanted to keep the Jews together, and they thought that by having a law, not experience, the law, that they could control them and get what they wanted? I'm not sure how much they knew at the time, except they had fallen into the left brain only, and probably fear. The Jews certainly were taken to Babylon. All kinds of things happened to them. So I could imagine someone just thinking, get rid of all that other stuff. We have a law and you follow that and we can keep things together. And the Roman church, they absolutely, nobody who'd had experience could be a part of the church. I mean, you could be killed easily for that. The heretic was the mystic, one who experienced. And did they know were they just left brainers who didn't know? And so they thought this is the way that they can organize society and keep us together. And although, were they all schizophrenic? And since they couldn't find the meaning, then they wanted power. And then it just grew into a horrible situation in which we were to consume the Christian religion if we were in a Christian place. We had to consume that and give all our allegiance to the church. And then later it developed economic. And then it's like, we didn't quite know what happened to us,
Yeah.
And we're figuring out now, oh, this is what happened. And no, we don't have to be like this. We can change this.
400, you just described 400 years of Western democracy development and along with the church.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, it was, wonderful. But the French philosophers were very well advised, and they advised the world that in a way they could, that we should be free and independent and sovereign beings. They did give us that, but you can't maintain that without the connection to everything they said was unimportant. In order to have a really democratic world, we have to have connections to the right brain and the heart. We have to feel thoughts. We don't do that in the left brain.
Okay, so let's go back. So you had 3 unbelievably traumatic incidents in your life happen in a row. Your mother died, and then a year later your son was taken from you, and then 2 years later your husband was taken from you. How did you approach life differently after your husband passed, and you'd gone through this 5 years of trauma and loss?
Yeah, 3.
3 years, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that I was not prepared for his death, but with the experiences that I had and that we both had, that helped me, that he was having experiences too. That knowing that world exists made it possible. And yes, I remember when my brother-in-law and sister-in-law came to the door, because my brother-in-law was Hungarian, so they called him to come tell me. And at first it was like, I can't live without him too, but I could. And I think it's that knowledge and that experience that changes everything. And this is a part of life. Clearly we die. And I also had to realize that they could all 3 have been simply brain damaged and still alive. So one knows what to be grateful for.
Mm-hmm.
My mother could have been, she was hit by a car, killed instantly, which was good for her that she didn't suffer. And my son, my son was unconscious. He never gained consciousness. He really was brain dead, probably from the beginning. And then my husband was killed instantly. There were gifts in it. I saw women with a son in a wheelchair, the son unconscious, totally not knowing what's going on. That is another level of grief. And so, you can assess your situation and realize there are gifts within tragedies. And the gifts are healing. And also because I felt after those 2 years of experience with Ph.D. on the other side, and Istvan's experiences too, that this is not a fluke. In fact, my husband started having right away experiences of his death, but we looked at them symbolically that he was changing. That was the death of the old Istvan, which was true, but it was also true that he was going to die. And I don't know whether it was a week or when, before he went to Budapest, he was going to go, and because once it became free, he had some of his equipment made there so he could give money business to them, and they would be cheaper than here. And of course he flew home, but he got to see his family. So he was going to go, but then he had a vision, I guess about a week before he left. And he was with, it was like Pachamama, except she was like, maybe not of the earth, but of the ethereal realms. And he had encountered her quite a few times. And she was telling him, this is it, Istvan. It's time for you to come. It's time for you to leave the earth. And he was just, he said, I wasn't afraid of death anymore. I just didn't want to do it. I wanted to stay here. And he was concerned about me too, leaving me at that point. But he said, wait a minute. He's talking to the spirit. Don't you think I ought to have a say about this? Mm-hmm. And she said, well, Istvan, just who do you think did say it? Just who do you think is behind this? Of course it's you. And he said, well, I've just got to go to the bathroom. Well, she said, we'll be here when you come back. And so he came back and the vision was still continuing. And she said, Istvan, it's time. But she was an image that he had encountered before, like he saw her at Machu Picchu, and there was a waterfall there in his vision. And he said she was standing in the middle of the waterfall, and she was the most beautiful woman. He said, just the most beautiful woman you could imagine. And then she became ancient. But he said it was, of course, the life process, but it was a consciousness so powerful. And I heard, when I was in Peru, I heard other shamans talk about that experience, that Huayna Picchu of the feminine, that it's just the soul, so incredibly, just beyond what you can experience. And then she'd be very young and beautiful and very ancient and old and shamanic. And that was the one who was talking to him, so.
Did you feel your husband's presence also after he passed on?
I did. I did. Not as strongly as I did with Ph.D, but then I had to remember they are one soul here. And when I would be with my son, Ishtvan was always present.
Oh, both of them. Huh.
And I thought, well, after all, they are one soul. So there were things, that were not in our belief system, but he actually had the experience of being born as two. And when that happened, then our son would talk to him in the vision and explain what was going on. Then he had the experience of being born as one person, and then our son didn't say anything because he knew they were both. And that would seem so strange, but it was just so clear that was the truth. He experienced it. He knew it after that.
Well, so you said this a few times, like you said that your son and your husband were of the same soul. So can you walk me through that? Like obviously they were born at different times, so there weren't twins. Like that's kind of how we would assume it in our left brain, that they were born together and they shared a womb and they shared a soul. But this is obviously a father and a son, your husband and your son. And how did they share a soul? But how did they come to us and leave us at different times?
Yes, well, it's they simply were, the soul took on two different forms, two bodies. And when, an example of just something interesting about this, when my husband was a little kid and playing in trees, and I think they were playing stork or something, and he fell out of the tree and hit his head in a water trough, and it must have slightly twisted the brainstem, because before that his mother said she could read anything to him once, and he didn't forget it. It was and after that he had trouble. He would forget things, but our son said, if you hadn't done that, you and Mom might not have been able to conceive me, and that's why you had to keep yourself on ice until I leave. In other words, it was, if he had continued and been interested in all the things, then we wouldn't have been able to conceive Ph.D. But he actually put his soul on ice in a sense that he didn't investigate those things at all. He wasn't interested. But when Ph.D. died, suddenly he was. But he had had a vision just before Ph.D. died of how we died too. But so it was that you and Mom probably couldn't have conceived me if you'd been both of us at once, So you had to stop that development, and then later, because our son was very interested in that kind of thing.
Also in life beyond death.
Yes,
yeah.
He was. So, those things you have to think. But when you experience them, they're true, no matter what our left brain had told us earlier, that there is so much more, and, that we've dreamt of in our philosophy, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting, this idea of souls being shared or being connected in some kind of way, and it's obviously not enough people are talking about this, right? And it's not very mainstream, but I think there is something about an energy that connects people together, right? That's much more powerful than normal. I guess nowadays for marketing purposes people call it love, or whatever. But you can meet strangers who you're incredibly connected with, and there's something else going on there.
Exactly, that, and it's very interesting too when we're close by someone. Both the hearts starts to synchronize, and if we embrace, then the hearts synchronize. There's just so many ways we are part of the field and we influence the field. But that when we're with someone, sometimes we know there's some kind of connection here that, I'm feeling. But I didn't tell my colleagues at the school that Ph.D. and Ph.D. were of the same soul. I hate to think with the left brain, it just seems so
absurd. Like if you're only using your left brain, all of this conversation is ridiculous. Yeah. It's so interesting, and I think that now, like you said, that this fifth renaissance, like we're starting to become more aware as human beings. But I think it's as a result of the current world and society we've created for ourselves being so shitty. Like we live today and we're happy we're alive, and I get to meet you, and we have friends and birthday parties and everything like that, but we're completely missing our higher purpose and our higher meaning, and whether that's whether that part of our brain or that part of our life experience is being suppressed on purpose or not is very interesting. And then of course now people are suffering from so many different versions of mental health disorders, and everyone's looking for answers that are not necessarily pharmaceutical companies delivering packages to your door. That I think that we're getting somewhere with this idea of reconnecting with nature, reconnecting with some greater purpose.
Yes, and I think if we do reconnect with nature, which is part of our body, that we will, it'll open us up to ourselves, our larger body, our larger mind. And it's even as a kid, I think, I don't want to get married and have kids and just continue the cycle without ever figuring this out. I mean, I don't want to do that. I don't want to give them that, But I think, yes, people are awakening and in amazing ways. And, we think, there's some people think, well, there were entities from other worlds who came and cut us, put an energy field around the planet so that we couldn't connect with the right brain or the heart. That's one belief. But the other is, and it's very direct and clear, that there were people who wanted power, who were ill themselves in the left brain, and they have done everything to dumb us down to keep us in the left brain. And I think we're waking up and realizing we have this incredible possibility. And I know many who go to Costa Rica, for example, and work with ayahuasca. They are totally changed. But I think that we are changing, and actually, if we don't make it this fifth renaissance, we might not be a species any longer, because those who are particularly ill and particularly in need of controlling us will merge us with the machine, merge us out of existence, and themselves as well.
Yeah. Or destroy the planet.
Along with, yes. Mm. Yes, if we look at the kind of severed science that we have, it's not connected to the heart and the right brain, although it has done some good things for sure. But if we look at those people who get scientific knowledge, they make a fertilizer that kills people, or they do something to the atmosphere or the medicines or whatever. It's like there's so much destructive possibility in what they're constructing, I don't want to say creating, that kills people and themselves and the planet. It's like there's something missing there. Why do we learn something and then use it destructively? It shouldn't be that way, and it wasn't in the past. There's certain things they would never do, although they could, but they would not do it because it was destructive.
Yeah, we're missing something, right? Like everyone's just focused on greed and power, and
it doesn't fulfill us in any way whatsoever. And we should know that by now.
One would hope we would know that by now. Yeah. So after you had these losses in your life, like when did you decide to make this your life? Like when did you decide that teaching about this, writing the books, sharing this kind of message, this understanding that you had, this enlightenment that you had, and when did you decide like that was going to be what you did?
I don't know that I decided it, but what I had done in my teaching was that I taught myth and fairy tale symbolic language. And that was, the classes were always huge, and they were wonderful students. I mean, we kind of learned a lot together, And so when my husband died, I had already decided I was going to retire and write some things, and but I didn't know exactly what at that point. So I retired early, but I had already decided to retire. And I'd taught for over 20 years, myth and symbol. and changed and learned so much with students. It was, just a very dynamic kind of situation that was happening from the 60s on. And so I thought, okay, so this year I'll quit. And that was in the year that my husband died in 94. And at first I didn't know. I thought, how can I ever explain, what we experienced, because I was writing the first book, Miracle. And so I thought, well, maybe I'll just say a little bit. Well, anyway, as it turned out, no. I wrote the book and I thought, if it helps one person, it's worth the effort.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't give a damn what anybody thinks. As a matter of fact, that's exactly what the night that my husband went to Hungary, the next day, he would usually stay up packing so that he could sleep on the plane. And so for some reason or other, I stayed up with him and I sat on the floor in the room where he was packing and we were talking. And then suddenly I just this horrible thing came over me. I didn't have any understanding of what it was. It was just horrible sadness. And I started crying. And it's almost like my husband knew, but he didn't. And he just held me and he said, just remember, we know what we have experienced. It doesn't matter what anybody else says. Now, why would he tell me that? It's almost like he knew somewhere in him he wasn't coming back. And I've thought about that. We don't have to give a damn about what someone else thinks. It's what do I know through my experience? And is it worth telling? And I thought, well, if it helps one person get through that horrible sorrow of losing a child or a husband or anyone we love, then it's good.
It's such a left brain exercise to experience like what you did with your right brain and then think about finding evidence to write a book about it so that other people can help other people, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And knowing the college group, they were so loving. The faculty and the students were, but the faculty was loving and kind and supportive, but they hadn't a ghost of an idea of what I was going through. Really, I just couldn't really talk.
It's strange that you didn't feel comfortable explaining what was going on with you, with your colleagues or the people who were closest to you. Did you feel like you would have been stigmatized or something like that?
I just knew that, like, this one close friend just went backwards. I knew that that's what would happen. I did try, actually, if I'm honest about it. I tried a few times, and it wasn't very successful. And they were loving, and they knew I was going through something. And I might say this or that, but it couldn't go anywhere. I met Kim. Kim had been a student of mine at the college. And so I think she was in a class of mine right after Ph.D. died, our son. And then she came to my house trying to find me, but I wasn't there. I was in Hungary. I had to go get my husband's body and bring it back. And so we would talk. And I'd say a few things, and she was really responsive. She could hear it. Mm-hmm. And so it turned out then that, that was a great gift. Because once Istvan died, there wasn't anyone I could really...
Well, that's the thing. It's going through what you went through is incredibly isolating because you've lost your family members. And then, of course, you've had this kind of enlightenment or this realization that there's more around us but then you had no one to talk to about it. Like, I would just find that so depressing, like that you've had these feelings and you know what you know, but you can't talk to anyone about it because they'll think you're crazy. Like it's just not having that outlet to share would drive me absolutely insane.
Well, the interesting thing though is that you can talk to the spirit world. There is that. But it reminds me, if I could tell really quickly.
We have plenty of time. No stress. Just enjoy. We've got 17 hours if you want to go for it. So
if there'll be time for this story.
Yeah.
I didn't mention the San Bushmen or the cave cultures. It's pretty clear now that the cave cultures were shamanic and actually had rituals and experiences. But the San Bushmen in the Kalahari Desert also had experiences. Now, archaeologists say they were about the same time, but the cave cultures were maybe a little earlier. But the San Bushmen say, wait a minute, we've been at this 65,000 years. That would be before the cave cultures. But the interesting thing about them is that, the Western world didn't pay any attention to them. What did they know? They're out there in the desert. They have no possessions. What do they know? Well, they knew a great deal because it's now known through various people, but especially Bradford Keeney, who had a vision, and he was later, after he finished his degree, had a dream in which there was a map showing him where to go. And so and then he was offered a position at a university in Southern Africa. And so he got a guide and he did go there. And it was to visit the Sand Bushmen. And he saw some people running across the desert to meet him. And when he got there, he said, "We are so happy to see you. We've waited for you for so long." And his vision it was clearly a sand, it had connection to the sand in it. And so he, over many, many years going and coming, they trusted him enough that they let him write about their experiences, their spiritual tradition. But before that, and even now, I mean, how many people know about the Sand Bushmen, that they, through their rituals for 65,000 years, have achieved cosmic consciousness. They used the whole brain through the heart, connecting to the cosmos. Mm-hmm. So here they were, people out in the desert who knew they lived so closely with nature. And when they were apart, they would have like a fluttering of the heart and the message would come through. But they also, Katie realized how they experienced this cosmic consciousness. And when he told them, well, there are people, in India who sit alone in an ashram and experience it alone. And they said, "Oh, alone? Oh, that's sad." Because they dance and dance and dance until they go into that higher consciousness. And it's together. They hold each other. They do all of these things. And they can even form that energy into like a little needle that they can throw and kind of ignite it in someone else. Yeah. I mean, here are these beautiful people, and they happy. I mean, they have such a profound sense of humor. It's just beautiful how we could learn from them. But of course, who were they? We didn't pay attention to them. And so this is the story that was told by them, is that there was a man who had beautiful cattle, and he had beautiful milk from them every morning. And then one morning he didn't have any. Next day he didn't have any. So he thought, okay, I'll stay awake and I'll see what's going on. And he saw these beautiful women coming from the sky, laughing and having a great time and stealing his milk. So he chased them and he couldn't catch except one, of course, the most beautiful one. And they married and lived together for a long time. But she had a box, and she told him that this was something very special from the sky. That was a gift from the sky people, and that he must never look at it. And so I thought, okay. And then years later, of course, he thinks that's stupid. This box I'm not supposed to look at. So she was out. He looked in the box, and he started laughing. And when she came home, she just looked at him, and she knew he'd looked in the box. And he said, "You silly woman, you silly, silly woman. There's nothing in that." And she just put her hand on it and she said, "You saw." And so she turned around and was never seen on the earth again.
Oh, wow. She left.
Even on this planet. She went back to the sky. And the old woman telling the story said, it isn't that he opened the box. It was that he didn't have the ability to see anything.
Or he wasn't ready to open the box, right?
No, he just didn't have the vision to see it. As left-brainers don't either. We don't when we can't see it. I mean, we said, who are those people? They don't own anything. They're out running around the desert. What do they know?
It's funny, I haven't had any visions or any feelings of having anyone else in my presence before, but I did walk across a desert. And I did a 12-day trek across a desert in central China near Mongolia, and I don't, nothing happened to me that was out of the ordinary, but there was such a beautiful kind of peace of mind and heart, and such a strong connection with nature. Because and I think the real key to all of that was no distraction. So there you put your phone away, and you're not going to use it again for 12 days. And then you walk every day. And I don't know, there was something about like the physical connection with the land, the physical exertion, rising with the sun, sleeping with the sun, like this kind of holistic, and I've never felt healthier, more relaxed, and then you come back into society, and you're distracted, and you're angry, and you're depressed, and you're bitter, and you're frustrated, and there's all this other stuff that I think all of that crap blocks our access to the right brain. All the distraction and the pettiness and all of this. I think that's what creates maybe this iron curtain that you mentioned at the beginning, right?
Yeah, and then if it lasts long enough, then we forget there's anything else. But yeah, that's beautiful because many people say that it's a ritual, the walking itself in nature. It's a ritual that ignites and opens us, body, and the cells actually have consciousness too. That feeling of just being absolutely at one with nature.
Yeah. Well, I made a TV show called Extreme Treks, and I would do these treks all around the world. So I did a trek in Peru, I did treks like everywhere. I've filmed in over 45 countries. Like I would do these treks, and we would go out for 10 days to 2 weeks, like no mobile phone access, no nothing. We'd be in the mountains, we'd be in the deserts, and I became addicted to it because it was an escape. But you feel healthier, you feel more connected.
And you are.
And you are, yeah. And then you have to come back here and deal with all the garbage again. I mean, it's such it ended up being really addictive to be able to go out there and feel that. And
yeah. And how can we integrate that? Because this is great. This technology is great.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many things that are, but how do we? It's like we don't know how to use our toys, how to play with them well. We surely ought to be able to have both in a balanced way so that the technology doesn't intrude. It's really about ready to take us over.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think the most important question maybe to ask is how do we find balance, right? Because because we have no balance. So, how do we take this economic society that we live in where everyone's trying to make money, spend money, borrow money, credit, debt, and give people actual time to connect with who they are, and because we're all just running around not knowing anything.
And ways to connect rather than, time to do drugs or I mean, that will make a cockroach of us.
Yeah. Well, even that is living. Like, I mean, I just think like we've all become slaves of an economic system, right? And there's people at the top who control it, and that's fine. That's not a conspiracy theory. We all know that, right? But how do we break out of that for just a few weeks a year where we can connect with something bigger, better, higher, nature, and not have to suffer financially for it? Yeah.
And then come back with it and integrate.
And integrate it, right? And not just do it and then forget about it.
And that was a problem, in the 60s with the kids. I mean, it's like, oh my God, there's a way to experience something. But many of them didn't know how to, well, we had no elders in our culture they didn't know how to integrate it. And I think that's what, if we could do these treks and come back with that balance and keep it, maintain it, change the world.
I mean, yeah, you can go walking across a desert in China for 12 days like I did and get an experience, or you can take LSD. And I'm pretty sure it's probably the same experience. Like it's just the LSD sitting in your, Hollywood apartment is the shortcut,
And I wonder, it seems like maybe we need them both, I know that with sacred medicine, it's like something you couldn't imagine. And I had read people write about how, this is useless and we shouldn't be doing this and this is wrong or we should do it. And I'm thinking they've never used it.
Of course, yeah.
I have no idea what they're talking about. Because when the brain opens to that, it's like a world that we have not been capable with the left brain of even having any idea about. And so but the body needs to be moving, as you would say. My husband was very athletic, and I wasn't. But I see now so much of what, at least in holding body and soul together, that movement is so important. The body needs to be involved. And they're just walking exercises for higher consciousness in some traditions.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we need to learn all of the things that we can do to include.
We need to learn all of the things that we trained ourselves to forget. Yeah.
True. Yes, we're not good at this. We're not good creators because we've we've constructed a massive prison for ourselves, and we can just deconstruct it and build something different, because we're beginning to catch on what we need, you know?
So where do you see yourself as educating people about this topic and about what happened to you and your growth through grief, but also through trying to access, your right brain and your heart? And where do you see your mission in trying to help other people or educate people? Like, where are you on your journey?
Well, of course, when I retired, I wrote Miracle of Death. And then I did 16 years of research in writing Merchants of Light, the consciousness that is changing the world. And then we went to London. I presented the book at the Scientific and Medical Network. And so it was doing things like that. Of course, when I came back, it was COVID. And then I started doing a lot of research about what's really going on and wrote a paper on that, which no one wanted to read.
That got buried.
Right.
Yeah.
But I couldn't have published it anyway. But I thought, well, it's circulated privately, but it was too much. But I'm on podcasts a lot, and different audiences. I think any audience that might be open to knowing that grief ultimately is creative and can be. And so that's what I'm doing. I'm writing another. It was going to be an article, but it's a book now on the evolutionary power of the heart, and I'm working with a man in Japan on a book, and Sylvain Bergeron. He's actually French Canadian, but he went to Japan. He's lived there for 30 years, married, and has a grown daughter now. And his grandmother, was like a shamaness, and it was a kind of interesting thing the way it happened, because her parents moved to New York, and they died. And she and her brother were on the streets of New York.
Oh, wow.
Just a whole different life of being a street kid. But there was probably from somewhere in Asia, and I don't remember exactly where he figured out that the woman who met his grandmother was from, but she was a shaman from somewhere in Asia. And she took to the little girl, and she said to her then, after knowing her for a while, when she was going to get to go back to Canada, she said to her, "You will know when I die." And so the woman, then his grandmother, got married, and it was true when she felt something had happened to her. And then she had all of the gifts of the shaman.
Really? So that passed on to her?
That she passed it on to her. And she worked with the police and finding missing people and these things, but she also had real intuitive and visionary knowledge. Well, when she died, she gave it to Sylvain, the man I'm working with. And so here he's had all of these experiences, and he teaches in a university in, I don't know which town, a small town in about an hour from Tokyo. And he had visions with John Dee, who was quite a philosopher in Europe and part of one of the Renaissance periods. Anyway, he heard me on Anthony Chin had done an interview on a film, and he then got in touch with me because he thought we could work together. So we are. It's been really kind of phenomenal. So I just, these things come, and when that's for you to do. So whatever I can do, I do. And
I wonder if his experiences, I don't mean to take this away from you at all, but I wonder if his experiences are better received in Japan as a professor, than his experiences would be received here, like in North America. Yeah. In Japan, he's getting less.
So I don't think he's going to be talking to anyone at the university.
Yeah, it's funny because as a human race, we're clearly suffering, but I think some countries are a little bit more enlightened than others, right?
And I think there's some Japanese who are, and I'm not sure it's at the university, but
I'm wondering when there will be a mainstream movement where people can really, grasp these teachings, really understand some of these experiences. Like it's so amazing to me that people aren't teaching this stuff in university at all, right? Like the whole education system is just a make us slaves and not ask any more questions.
It's true, but I did teach it for many years. It was more open. I don't know what's going on now, but, teaching, as Robert Graves said, mythology, somebody else's religion. So we did, and we talked about all the possibilities, these stories were telling us, fairy tales make it very clear there's something else,
But were you in a position as a professor, as a teacher, to actually talk about your own experiences without being stigmatized or looked down upon?
They're students, remember, so they're not old and stuck in cement somewhere. Hopefully they're all people are. But no, I was careful about but we're talking in mythology and symbolic language. And what is this experience? And of course, they went with me through the death of my son, a certain group of students, and then they knew me and came back and we talked. And also then when my husband died, so they were very dear people, and a lot of them had experienced horrible things with their friends being shot. As one person said, well, they only shoot on this side of the street. They don't, and wherever he lived in L.A.
Sure.
But they were pretty understanding of death, and they'd had their experiences. So they would then say, they would come to my office and say, I'm going to tell you something that I've never told anyone in my life. And so the students had some, and they were from various parts of the world too. It's a community college in Pasadena. So I had many levels of students. Some were going on to the university, and many were doing other things, but they had all kinds of experiences, so they were open, and I could talk to them. But inside the classroom, I was careful, but I did say some of the things when I came back. And for instance, we were talking about people in Mexico, and I can't remember the name of the people right now, but they take sacred medicine. And one student just, that was the one and only student who just said, I can't accept that, that those experiences were valid or worth anything. But later on, he wrote me later and said, I do see it now. Mm-hmm. But so good, sometimes you say something that's rejected, but it's in the brain.
It's in the brain, but don't you think like higher education just has lost its way in some ways? Like, I just feel like, when you grow up, like, or the way I grew up, like, you want to have these debates, you want to have these conversations. I want to understand your position and not judge you. I can disagree with you, but I'm not going. But I'm not going to judge you and say you're wrong. But let's talk about it. Like, that's why I do this. Like,
exactly, you talk with everybody. It's wonderful.
Yeah, but I don't sit here and judge. But I want to learn, and I'm the things that have happened to you have not happened to me.
And the things you've done, I've not done. I would love to have done some of them if I could, but I wouldn't have endured it.
Right, but this is what higher education should be doing, exactly. And it's not. Like there's no place for debate There's no place anymore for respectful debate. There's no place anymore for respectful disagreements. Like it's either black or white, and it's balls to the wall hatred.
But that I didn't. I left. I retired in '94, and we did have those kinds of discussions. And the students, they would, a lot of them, some of them had experiences, they told their experiences, and some of them didn't. And that's when I could legitimately say that I experienced this or that. I didn't go into a lot of things, but they were telling each other. And some of them had been in some pretty dangerous situations. So that class was open, and it was good. It was that kind of thing. And I went into literature for that very reason, because I thought, I don't want to go into psychology, their theories and all of that. I thought, well, literature is about real people's lives. And so we have to talk about all aspects of living. And so in a lit class, we could do that. And it was very dynamic. I loved teaching, and the students were fantastic. And, I've seen them sometimes years later, and they're still talking about those things, So I think it was then. I have no idea. I retired in '94. I don't know, and most of the people I know are no longer teaching there, because some were in their 90s and some certainly in their 80s. But so we don't know what's going on there now. But
well, I do a lot of guest speaking at universities. So I lived in China for 18 years. I lived in Shanghai, China for 18 years, and for a long, long time, I would travel around and talk about my experiences in China and the travels and the things I'd seen. I worked for the New York Times for 10 years, also covering China. So I got to see quite a bit before I started making television, and you definitely got a sense of over the years of this rigidity of ideas coming through, and every once in a while, you might find a wily old professor on tenure, male or female, who couldn't be fired and was finally speaking their mind. But the rest of everyone else was just kind of like holding court, because I think there was just such a fear of being fired, or a fear of being called out. And now with social media and all this other stuff, like,
I didn't have that when I was there. It wasn't.
Yeah.
But that would be terrible.
Well, yeah. I mean, can you imagine, like, just having an entire class of students not agreeing with you, and then having them, cancel your entire career because they posted something on social media like this? Like, these are things that actually happen, right? Like, and I just feel like I don't know what happened, but no one is respectfully gathering anymore to disagree with each other.
But they do, well, of course, there are all these alternatives, the podcast and the things like that. That is brilliant, because that can save us. And there are so many young people I've met who are interested in things and have their own, thing going. And it made me very sad, though, to see that during the last 4 years that the universities were complicit. They caught onto nothing, and they supported nothing that was truly healthy and valuable for the human being.
Did you just see? I just read the other day, you're going to love this. Harvard, I believe it was Harvard, is making COVID vaccines mandatory for the fall term.
When they didn't work. We know they don't work one way or another. And making them
Yeah. I mean, is Pfizer, one of the big beneficiaries of Harvard University? It just doesn't make any sense.
Yes. And they never even tested whether it would stop the infection or transmission. Never even tested, and they know it doesn't. So, yeah, when you see things like that, and, the medical departments of universities and our medical agencies and all of the world agencies, WHO, WEF, United Nations, they've been hijacked, clearly. And the universities seem to be hijacked right there with them. I was so disappointed to see. I mean, I had friends who had taught Brave New World 1984, taught critical thinking, and they didn't see anything that was...
Fell right into place.
Beautiful, good, kind people, but they didn't see a thing. Yeah, that's not a good situation to be in.
I wonder how much fear plays into us not being able to access our right brain and our heart, because I feel like society functions better for the elite when we're all afraid, and I think that
it does. They use the most advanced techniques of making us afraid and brainwashing us.
Yeah, but you look at the news media, like you read the news, you watch the news, right? It's all just fear, 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 and I wonder if this is a new tool to just keep us all in place, right?
Oh, it is. It's one of the most powerful tools, and they know it, and they've studied the top people in brainwashing and fear. No, fear is it, because the brain doesn't work. It cannot open when it's fearful. And we go right back to the reptilian brain of defense. No, they know what they're doing. They absolutely know what they're doing. And I think that it's even dangerous to listen to what they're doing on corporate media and the newspaper. They own it now. We need to know they own it. And so we'd better find out sources from people who are reliable and we know are reliable, and check it out with others. And we have some work to do. In other words, if we think we want to know what's going on.
I had an idea a couple of nights ago. I was sitting around chatting with some friends, and I was thinking, like, they should come out with a Ph.D. For life. If you have a podcast and you've done a multidisciplinary podcast and you've done 1,000 podcasts, you have heard 1,000 different ideas from 1,000 different people, and debated with them and learned from them and taken something and put it into your own life. Like, if you've done 1,000 podcasts and you're talking to different people from different walks of life, like, that should be rewarded, and people should listen to that person who has had that wealth of experience. Because, like, I do this podcast, I release 2 a week. So if I were to do this for 10 years, I would have done 1,000 podcasts. And it's like going to school. Like, I'm learning from you, but I'm learning from all these other people. And then these people who are doing these podcasts, who are really reaching out and doing, like, empirical research, could be thought leaders of the next generation, because they've sampled everything. And I think there's something to that. Like there's something to sitting down and talking to everyone for 2 hours.
That's in the South before television. People always sat out on their front porches.
Yeah.
In the evening. People come by and they talk. I don't know what kind of conversations they had. I don't remember.
But that's how you got the news. That's how you figured out what was going on in town. That because you just didn't have access to everything, right? Yeah.
But now my mother and her side of the family were more Irish. She believed, at least, and my father more English. And he was very left brain. And my mother would always love to think about things, explore things, ask questions. She was one who would, if she sat on the front porch, she would be talking to people about that kind of thing, if she trusted them. But then there are those who wouldn't do it. My father wanted the facts. I don't want to watch anything that's fiction. And he was dear, but he was kind of British in that sense, and left brain. But I wished at least in those days they had physical contact with people. They sat out there. They weren't watching television or the news. And they talked about at least things that were going on around them. But we've lost that even.
We have lost that, haven't we? I don't know any of my neighbors.
Yeah, it's a problem. We know a few who lived on the same street, and it's interesting because the couple next door from Persia, the Persian part of Iran, and so their story is very interesting.
Mm-hmm. I bet.
No, I couldn't mention too many others.
I just feel like we're losing our connection to the things that are important.
We have lost it.
Yeah, and especially the connection with each other.
Yeah, and that's what I think. Like this kind of thing is wonderful, and I'm so grateful for it because if I had done my first book in a bookstore, maybe there'd be 20 people, and there can be thousands. You're talking to, but we can't forget that we need to get together to talk about these things. If we don't have that physical contact and sharing food or drink or whatever and talking, that we lose some. This is good, but it can't be a replacement of.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting because when I decided I wanted to set this up, the first decision I made was it has to be face to face. I have to meet these people because I want to have this energy connection. Yeah. And I want to be able to really connect with someone, and I think this is the only way to do it.
Yeah, so that's why you're doing it. That's so important. So you have both at once. It's going out, but you have the connection with the person.
Yeah, and I'm learning, and I just feel like if you're sitting across from me, I'm completely engaged, and then when you leave, I've learned as much as I can learn about someone in a short period of time, but without distraction. I had a guy come in here a couple of weeks ago, and we went for like 2.5 hours, I think, and it was a great conversation. He goes, that's the first time I've been awake for 2.5 hours where I didn't look at my fucking phone.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
because in here it's you're having a real connection. Like you're not.
That's so good.
Yeah.
That is so good.
Trying to bring it back somehow.
And you're in the process of it. And listening to, I just, for a while, I just go through in the beginnings and see the people you had. And I thought, how can you know about all those things from different walks of life, Yeah. That's amazing. And it also helps us to have gratitude for such differences.
I love it. I'm interested in everything. And then also, too, like when someone comes in and brings to me a totally different idea or perspective, I'm enthralled. Like I'm throwing myself into it.
That's intelligence when that happens.
Well, I want to learn, right? Like that's why I traveled the world. That's why I moved to China when I was 22.
I mean, that's pretty amazing at 22 to go to China, and you stayed 18 years.
18 years, yeah. I was lucky. I got out just before COVID locked down the country, and then I was in Dubai for most of the COVID, and then I just moved here about 8 months ago. Yeah, I've been all over, man.
Yeah. Well, that's good, though.
Yeah.
I mean, that's wonderful.
But that's it. Like, that's why I traveled, was to learn more about other people and other walks of life and other religions and the way people organize themselves and the way people find happiness and take care of their family. And then you bring that into you take the bits and pieces from all the different walks of life, and then you bring it into your own life somehow.
Yeah, like different ways of thinking even of family and bringing
different ways of connecting with nature, the afterlife, like grief. Like every culture has a different way of dealing with grief. So it's very interesting. I was thinking actually when you were speaking just earlier, like imagine when we were talking about fear, imagine what would happen to organized religion if we no longer feared death.
Yeah, true.
Yeah. I mean, it would be over. Like the fear of death controls everything in our society. It makes us rush to spend all of our money before we die. It makes us, it makes us fearful of death. So, then we gravitate to a religion that'll teach us what to do so that we can have a better death, which doesn't make any sense. Like if I treat people better, I'll have a better afterlife or whatever, right? Like this fear pushes us in all these directions.
Yeah, that are not healthy or don't answer any issue. But I think that with the near-death experiences, I mean, millions and millions and millions of people have had that experience, and they come back changed because they know, as you said, there is no death. So they wouldn't be going to join a church. If they belong to one, fine, but they already know that there's love. I mean, they talk about experiencing love in a way that they can't even possibly explain or describe, and that we all come from that life. So when we don't fear it, we're not going to be taken in by authorities or material things
I mean, when I'm looking for answers, I go out into nature.
No, that's good.
I'm not going to, find some book that may or may not have been written or altered or changed. I'm trying to find real answers.
I like that. I think that's where we can.
So, is there anything that we haven't talked about that you would like to talk about today? We went deep.
We did. Really.
Okay. And what do you have coming up for the next kind of 6 to 12 months? What's on your agenda for continuing to share this message?
Oh, good. There's a documentary of Merchants of Light made by Anthony Chen in France. And that's probably going to be out in about a week.
Oh, wow. That's fast.
I think it's about a week. Yeah, I think it's just one little thing to do until it's out. So he does a beautiful job. I wanted some of the major points about these cultures, about how they were suppressed and how they re-emerged, and that this is the 5th time and so on. I just wanted that in film because that's easier, I think, to take in. And he does a beautiful job. So that should be out in a week.
And are you in the documentary, or are your teachings in it, or your books? Or
I narrate it, really. And actually, he calls it an interview. Yes, I'm doing the talking. And then I mentioned the book, The Evolutionary Power of the Heart. That should be out, I don't know, within a few months. And then the book with Sylvain in Japan. And I don't think we have a title for it yet. So those are things I'm working on now.
Yeah. And beyond the books, you said you're doing a lot of podcasts and stuff like that, but have you ever been invited to like teach or lecture at higher education, or, because I feel like your perspective on things is pretty unique and something that everyone should be aware of, whether they agree with you or not.
Well, and they can really go to the text, and they can go to the, it's evidential, I should say. That was one thing I wanted to do. Having been brought up in such a left-brain culture, I wanted as much physical evidence as possible that these cultures existed. And that's the amazing thing. In the 20th century, here were these scholars, not connected in any way, who were discovering these cultures that existed and saw them for what they were. And they'd been submerged for centuries. And so we just know so much more about ourselves. And I think that, I want the book and the film to help people to know that. But I taught for so many years and I loved it. But I think that
that part is done.
I think in terms of being in a university, they'd probably make me get a few shots.
But also too, I think beyond just university or beyond teaching, like your message, I feel is more more palpable or more easy to understand, when it's face to face, right? Like, and that's like, but not just you. I'm hugely in favor of like the human medium, right? And I just feel like, if 200 people gathered in a room to listen to you talk, it would be much more powerful than 200 people individually reading your book.
Well, probably so. And if that's to be, it'll happen, But right now, just doing the writing and doing the podcasts. And sometimes, I talk to a group here or there. But, since COVID, we have to get back in the practice of that, sort of.
We do, because we've all gotten used to sitting at home by ourselves, haven't we?
Sort of, yeah. And, I'm also learning that in growing old, I'm 87 now, that there are things that fit the age, well. And what can I do that is the most beneficial for the years that I have left, whatever they are? And, of course, that's a great thing that we don't know. But also to have the body healthy, to do the things that can connect the body to nature and each other and be healthy. And I just sort of think that if that kind of thing is going to happen, it will come,
That's great. That's a great way to lead life.
It is. Well, and if you have an intention for something, it goes out into the field, and the field works with it and brings it back to you if that's what you want, I really do think that I sort of seen that happen enough times that I know that the mental intention works with the field.
And if you're meant to do something, it will happen in some way. Yeah. That's wonderful. So where can we find all of your books and your teaching and your writing and everything? Do you have a website?
Yes, it's Kamlak, KAMLAK.com. And I have webinars. And those I find are really helpful too, webinars and a lot of videos, a lot of YouTube. And actually, I have a few articles there, and Kim has posted all of the videos of podcasts that I've done there. And people can order the books from Kamlak, and they can sign up for the newsletter. And if they do that, they get a copy of the chapter from Merchants of Light, or if they want it from Miracle of Death.
That's wonderful. Excellent. Well, I can't thank you enough for swinging by today.
Thank you. I've just enjoyed it so much. I feel like I know you now.
We try. I mean, I again, too, it's like it's so rare just to talk to someone for 2 hours, isn't it? I publish twice a week, but I have more than 2 podcasts a week because I have to kind of bank them every now and then because I film still and I'm travel a little bit, so I don't release it like right away. So I have a few, people that I keep. But it's fun.
Yeah, it's fun, and it's very important, creative, and you're doing what you know should be done to help bring us to a healthier state of being.
I think everyone has a story to tell, and we should all be listening, and I just feel like people who close their ears are not the way. It's not the way forward.
I think it is an illness, a pathology that is pervasive on the whole planet. Not to listen to what people, that's at least something I did learn, I think, in the South, is that people did talk to each other, even if it wasn't about something like this. They listened, and it was very important that you heard what the neighbor had to say. And with these older women, when I was middle school, that they related to children very well. And we would talk about things, and they would talk about things, that I could understand, but that might be good or better to do. And that was an education for me. I love that.
Yeah. Why would anyone not want to absorb knowledge from another person? You basically have to see that other person as not worthy, and that's ridiculous.
But I don't know. They don't go through the conscious process, but they don't want to know it. Or do they tell themselves there's nothing really there to know?
That's even worse.
That's worse. That's what you said. It's kind of a disdaining of the individual. But if we just knew what's walking around us, what they have to tell.
Yeah. It's wild. Anyways, thank you so much for swinging by. So look, this is us right here. And I go to the wide view, so here, and we can shake hands just to let everyone know we're in the same room.
Good.
Yeah.
We're in the same.
Wonderful to meet you. Thank you so much for coming by today.
I'm just delighted to get to know you.